In the 80s, films and TV shows could be taken to a whole new level with great atmospheric songs that brought those worlds to life. Up next, the co-writer of one of these songs tells the story of writing a massive hit from 1985 that helped spark one of the most iconic television shows of the entire decade. He wrote it with a former Eagle who brought it to life with an engaging performance. The story is next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you've ever heard a song in a movie or a TV show that just knocked you out and you waited for the credits to see who sang it and then immediately went out and bought the soundtrack, you're going to love this channel. I've done that plenty of times. The stories directly from the legends. Make sure that you subscribe below right now and click the bell so you never miss out on our daily content. Take a second to look at our Patreon as well and our merch. We've got new merch. Check out this phone case. It's pretty cool. Choose music. Anyway, I had to throw that in there. Both of these things just help us to keep the music alive, keep this channel going. We really appreciate it. Growing up in the 80s was phenomenal. So many great memories, TV shows, films, music, everything was amazing.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? What about the DeLorean?
Seriously, growing up in the 80s, it was amazing. I'm sure those who grew up in the 70s or the 60s could make an argument, and they will, but the 80s rocked because it was that last moment in our culture, before technology completely took over. It's like the perfect balance of wonder and advancing technology. We were seeing new advancements in technology that were really cutting edge. Like a little TV.
The Me TV, the Sony Watchman, the first truly personal TV.
You remember that? But we still had our imagination that wasn't completely mobilized by gadgets. We didn't have instant gratification. We had to wait 4 to 6 weeks for anything that we had shipped to us through the mail, whether a poster or, the Columbia House 12 CDs for a penny or the 12 cassettes for a penny. 4 to 6 weeks, it was like 6 months for us. Those were the joys of growing up in the 80s. It just made us more reliant upon our own wonder and our own creativity. Video games were fun, but we were more about experiencing it in real time by playing. What I mean by playing is when we loved a TV show, like, for example, Knight Rider. Instead of playing a video game about it, we go out and jump on our Knight Rider big wheel and play with our friends and make up our own episodes. Just using our imaginations, using a stick for a sword, all those kinds of things. I remember playing Dukes of Hazzard with my cousin Mark.
Just a good old boy, never meaning no harm.
I just hated it because he always got to be Bo because he had blonde hair. I had to be Luke all the time. We had a lot of cool companions to our favorite movies and our favorite TV shows that made them just come alive and leap off the screen, whereas today it seems like video games and or technology are the primary ways that we go beyond the films or TV shows. We had comic books and paperback tie-ins to the movie, toys including action figures and play sets. We even had coloring books and activity books. Bikes, t-shirts, cartoons based on it on Saturday morning.
Transformers, more than meets the eye.
Our favorite soundtracks. Speaking of soundtracks, one of the best soundtracks ever for a TV show that we all love was Miami Vice. Who didn't cop the Crockett and Tubbs look? Here's a picture of me trying to do my best Sonny Crockett as a nerd impression. Oh boy. I remember dressing up like Sonny Crockett and playing Miami Vice with my friends in the neighborhood. And I used to play this soundtrack on my Walkman all the time. It just brought it to life for me. The Miami Vice soundtrack was a perfect TV companion. It was the perfect music meets TV extravaganza. it even had iconic musicians acting in the episodes. There was Ted Nugent.
Definitely Miami.
And Gene Simmons.
Yeah, I vaguely recall something about the nasty little soiree in the Everglades.
Little Richard.
For a better world! And let us pray for a righteous world!
Frank Zappa, for heaven's sake.
You know what I think? I think Moroto told the cop about my money.
Phil Collins.
And you're the middleman. And what's in it for me then?
Miles Davis.
You're crazy. I was lucky to get out of there alive.
Sheena Easton was even Crockett's lady. And of course, Glenn Frey.
Hey, Blood! Take 5!
The former Eagle had 2 hit songs from the soundtrack, which we'll get into that, but let's talk about the soundtrack album first. It hit #1 on the Billboard charts. It sold over 4 million copies. I'm going to go out and say that I'm pretty sure it was the biggest selling TV soundtrack of the 80s. I'll have to look that one up, but I'm about 99% sure. Of course, had the #1 instrumental hit from Jan Hammer that was part of the legendary opening of each episode of Miami Vice. Every 80s kid got completely pumped every time we tuned in. Am I right? It was awesome. And then there was Phil Collins' 1981 hit that was used in an episode. Own the Night by the spectacular Chaka Khan. As well as Vice by Grandmaster Melly Mel.
You have the right to remain silent.
Better Be Good to Me by the Queen Tina Turner. And the 2 songs by Glenn Frey, Smuggler's Blues, which was actually from Glenn's 1984 album, The All-Nighter.
It's the nature of the business, it's the smuggler's blues.
In fact, the 16th episode of Miami Vice was named after the hit Smuggler's Blues. It starred none other than Glenn Frey as the villain, as the bad guy.
Take them down. They'll be back in our faces. It'll be violence again, man. I hate violence, Jimmy.
The hits that really drove the sales of Miami Vice's soundtrack, though, were, of course, Jan Hammer's theme to Miami Vice. That went to #1 and was the last instrumental to hit the Billboard Hot 100 until 2013. Wow. And Glenn Frey's #2 hit, You Belong to the City. Hit #2, although it did go to #1 on the rock charts, it also went to #2 on the AC charts. It was a massive song. These songs drove sales of the album because you couldn't get them anywhere else. The other songs I've talked about you can get on other albums, but I remember loving You Belong to the City as a 9-year-old. I loved the saxophone part. It was one of those perfect time capsule 80s songs that as a kid, listening to it on my Walkman, it seemed to just whisk me away from the safe confines of the small town, potato capital of the world, Blackfoot, Idaho, that I grew up in, to the streets of the Neon City. It's one of those songs from 1985 that just drops you right back into the glorious 80s. Do anything to go back. I had a chance to talk with Jack Tempchin, who wrote You Belong to the City and Smuggler's Blues with the late great Glenn Frey, as well as numerous songs for the Eagles, including Peaceful Easy Feeling and Already Gone. We've had him on the show a few times. He's such a great guy. He was very close with Glenn if you've seen the other episodes, and he co-wrote most of his solo material. Jack has so many great stories, so let's get the skinny on these Miami Vice classics right now as we reminisce about the 80s. So as we go into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses that I always wear. Speaking of the neon 80s, right now, if you go to Zenni.com, you can get Zenni's new glow-in-the-dark styles featuring neon daytime colors that light up in the dark. Very 80s. You got to check it out today. It's very cool. Here's the story. Glenn Frey wrote so many standards.
There's songs I wrote with Glenn that we didn't ever record. And so nobody's heard them. And so I'm doing them. I mean, it's not like having Glenn do them, but there's songs still, and I feel the world has to hear those too.
Well, let's talk about one of his other great songs, You Belong to the City. 'Cause you belong to the city. Which I felt like huge hit, went to number 2. I was rooting for it to go to number 1. I think it was kept off the top spot by We Built This City by Starship at the time. That's a song that was number 1 on the rock charts and number 2 on the AC charts. That was like a crossover song. To cross over to 3 different charts like that. And that was a song that, of course, deals with those who kind of live in the big city and crowded, very lonely place and those feelings, and wrote it for Miami Vice.
Yeah, we had a script of an episode of Miami Vice because Glenn had met Michael Mann, the producer, on a plane. Oh, Smuggler's Blues we already had, really.
It's the nature of the business. It's the smuggler's blues.
You Belong to the City, there was an episode where one of the guys goes back to New York City where he's from, and he's wandering around the streets, you know. I just remember sitting up in my little house in LA, and Glenn's playing this E minor thing, and it's really cool. And, you know, he's making some stuff up, El Blurto, and he goes, You Belong to the City. And I just go, whoa, that's it.
The sun goes down, the night rolls in.
And then Glenn said later, he says, well, really, I put 3 songs together. You know, he had an intro. And then he had the body of it, and then he had the outro where it goes boom, 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 boom. Yeah, I just took 3 famous songs, and I don't remember what they were, and I just kind of put them together. It was just genius. And then the same thing with the sax part.
Great at coming up with those sax lines, man.
Yeah, oh yeah. And bass lines too, you know, he said, yeah, I like a signature bass line. So he wouldn't just go boom, boom, boom. You know, he would always try to write a bass line that had its own little melody that was memorable.
It starts out that sax line slow, and I love how it does that. And then you hear his voice. The way he sings that, he brings something different to his voice there.
Goes down, the night rolls in.
It's not like obvious, but it's like kind of got some grit and some darkness in that voice, and you can really, he sets the stage for that song so perfectly.
Nobody knows where you're going.
I just almost like a bystander, you know. I mean, I was really good at what I did, making up the stuff, but as far as translating it into a record, no. And he had all that, and I would just kind of mysteriously watch as it came together. And even when he's playing like the rhythm guitar on something, he's thinking about the song, and do I need to play it precisely like this, or do I need a soft romantic touch or whatever? He's always connecting it. You Belong to the City, you know, just the mystery of this guy going back and saying, yeah, everything's still screwed up, but this is me, I'm part of this. And he just put that, I don't know, just a miracle how he could do that and make it work.
And he did that. The Miami Vice episode was The Prodigal Son, and that was really the theme to that. Along with the Miami Vice theme that Jan Hammer played. Those 2 songs drove that Miami Vice soundtrack to number 1 for 11 weeks. And it was the biggest selling album of 1985 at that time. People don't realize that, how big that was. And it was because of those 2 songs.
And then Smuggler's Blues.
It's the nature of the business. It's the smuggler's blues.
We wrote that right here. And I'm down in San Diego, and this is a garage I had converted to my little studio. And Glenn came down here, and he and Irving Azoff had purchased the movie rights to a book called Snowblind about the cocaine trade. He said, yeah, we're going to write a song for this movie. I want to call it Smuggler's Blues. It's going to have some cool slide guitar. I had some kind of 8-track tape machine, and we laid it down. You know, we talked a lot about the war on drugs and the futility and the stupidity of it all, and we got to say really a lot about it in that song.
There's trouble on the street tonight, I can feel it in my bones.
It's unfortunately still true today, even though pot's legal now, but still it's like, so that was a pretty great experience to get to write that in here.
I mean, that was not a typical pop song at all, to tackle a subject like that, like you said, is still going on. And he was way ahead of his time to be able to talk about something that was that much of an issue politically and socially. I remember reading something about him saying in an interview, he said, "You don't spend 15 years in rock and roll without coming in contact with entrepreneurs," as he says. I wanted to write a song about drug smuggling for a long time, but I'm glad I waited for this one. It's everything I wanted to say on the subject. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it's the lure of easy money. It's got a very strong appeal from the point of view of the guy selling the drugs, you know.
So baby, here's your ticket, put the suitcase in your hand. He
was caught in the web just like everybody else. But yeah, I was really thrilled. We got to say everything we wanted and put it in there, and yet has a cool musical thing.
Yeah, that bluesy, it's got that bluesy guitar. That's what I love about it, is at that moment in the charts, I mean, it went to number 12 on the pop charts, but it just didn't sound like anything on the radio. I mean, he was great at that. But You Belong to the City has been included. He's done that on the Eagles tours. It's one of the solo songs that he did as well. That was cool. I saw that DVD of the farewell tour, and he does that on there.
You know, to me, I mean, everybody has a different relationship with people. You know, I never worked for Glenn. I was always a partner with him and a friend with him. He followed through. And I'm talking about 47 years of experience with him, not just when he was big time and famous, but when he didn't have any money and when he was just like me there. And so the whole thing. So it's very special. You can only appreciate something like that when you look back over the whole thing and you see it. And I look at the whole thing and go, man, this was a hell of a guy.
Leave us a comment about these 80s classics. What are your memories of the Miami Vice soundtrack and the music from it? Tell us about it in the comments. What are some other memorable songs from TV soundtracks that you think we ought to cover here? The 80s had a lot of them. Let us know in the comments. If you like this video, we do invite you to subscribe below and make sure that you click the bell so you never miss out. We love having you here. We love doing this every day. Make sure to check us out on Patreon as well as our new merch to help us keep the music alive. That is the goal as always. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth.